Big Ange has been sacked. Arsenal are targeting Kepa Arrizabalaga as the backup to David Raya. And it looks as though the Benjamin Sesko deal is very, very much on. We're going to discuss all that, plus more, your comments, your thoughts from the live chat, all coming up on today's episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Let's get into it. Hey, everybody. Happy Saturday and welcome back to another live episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, your host, Harry Symeou. I got to be honest, cards on the table. I'm suffering from a bit of a hangover this morning. I'm feeling a little bit ropey. I'm feeling a little bit rough. Had a pretty big night out yesterday. It was a great night out. I'm not knocking it for a second, but every time I have nights out like that now, I come into this kind of period of reflection where I'm like, am I too old for this? Because my God, the recovery time never used to be this long. But hey, here we are and we're ready to talk Arsenal. Can't think of a better therapy than that. And we've actually got some progress to report on one of the big deals that's been talked about from an Arsenal perspective this summer. And that is with regards, of course, to Benjamin Sesko. But we'll get into that very, very shortly. There's a couple of other stories I just want to quickly, I beg your pardon. I just want to very, very quickly touch on. So let's do those first. And we'll start off with Big Ange, who was sacked yesterday by Tottenham Hotspur. Now, I know this is an Arsenal podcast, but I've got some pretty strong opinions on this. And I figure most Arsenal fans probably wanted him to stay. That isn't going to be the case. He is gone. Who's going to replace him? Maybe we'll touch on that a little bit as well. But I just want to touch on, first of all, the decision by Tottenham to sack him. I can't believe there are people that think Spurs have made a bad call. So it was announced yesterday, or it was reported yesterday before, obviously, it was announced, that Tottenham have parted ways with Ange Postecoglou after ending their, 17-year trophy drought with that Europa League victory in Bilbao. But look, the cold, hard facts are this. Tottenham Hotspur, as a football club, as much as we feel a certain type of way towards them, being Arsenal fans and living, as I do, in an area that is just mixed in terms of, the fandom, I come across them every single day. Them winning something, right, makes them even more unbearable than they normally are. So, like, for them, obviously, there's a win there and there's something to brag about and there's something to get excited about, and bless them. They all went out for their little trophy parade after winning the second-rate European trophy, and even have gone around calling themselves European champions and all that. Like, bless them, right? That's their level, right? That's where they're at. But it was a real win for them in the sense of it gave them something to smile about. It gave them something to celebrate. And that's not been the case, has it, for those Tottenham fans? For, as I mentioned, 17 long years. But I don't think that should paper over the cracks. I've never, from the day Ange Postecoglou arrived, bought into the hype around him. I never thought he was as good a coach as some people were making out when Spurs were on that incredible run at the beginning of last season. Obviously, that leveled out. They missed out on Champions League football. They go again. And yes, of course, like us, they suffered with a lot of injuries and they had a lot of problems along the way. But as much as we mock them, as much as that rivalry between us and them exists, and as much as I would normally talk down the size of the club, the history of the club, and all the rest of it, you can't deny that Tottenham are probably in the biggest 6 football clubs in this country. Like, in terms of support, in terms of size, all the rest of it, they've got that about them. Whatever you think about them and their lack of success and, their failure to achieve kind of the really big things, they're a huge, huge football club. And so under no circumstances, even if you've won silverware, should finishing 17th in the Premier League on 38 points, which might have got you relegated in some previous seasons, at no point, under no circumstances, can that be acceptable. So Tottenham have 100%, from a footballing perspective, in my opinion, made the right decision by moving Ange Postecoglou on. Now, I spoke to some Spurs fans last night when I was out who were very emotional about the fact that he'd been let go. I just think, they're sort of clinging on to that little bit of success. But when you zoom out and look at the bigger picture, it was dire, wasn't it? It was really dire last season for Tottenham Hotspur. Yes, of course, they won the Europa League, and congratulations to them for that. But they just, they're nowhere near the level that they need to be at. And I make Daniel Levy and the people around him right to have called time on Ange Postecoglou's Tottenham career. He is also a manager, in my opinion. This is the final point I'll make on this. That just talks too much. Like, there's a balance, isn't there? Because we all talk about people saying, well, we want characters in football and we want personalities in football. And I agree with that. But I think in Ange Postecoglou's case, this is somebody who talks too much. He went very big on, I always win in my second season, mate. Really, really big on that, to the point where, he could have quite easily turned out to be a meme. In fairness to him, he did get over the line. He did win that trophy. And instead, that will be remembered as one of the kind of coldest predictions in football history. So you got to give him that. You got to give him his flowers and his dues for that. But then he stood on a podium in front of thousands of people and probably millions more watching worldwide and said, season 3 is normally better than season 2, only to be sacked like, a week and a half, 2 weeks later. And that's a classic example of where talking too much can blow up in your face. And so he's gone, and that's that. I mean, there's been a lot of Arsenal fans in my chat box recently who have said Spurs have had a better season than us, and Spurs have won silverware and we haven't. Therefore, they've overtaken us. Blah blah bloody bloody blah. It's all a load of nonsense, right? Because if they had such a great season, they wouldn't have sacked their manager 2 weeks after the season ended. And as for the Europa League, which, look, I'm not trying to play it down, but the reality and the fact is that it is the second-rate European trophy. And I think with the way that the formats of those UEFA competitions have changed, it's become even weaker and easier to win. Therefore, the achievement of winning the Europa League doesn't stack up as much as it would have done maybe 3 seasons ago. So that's what I wanted to say on Spurs, because if you're sitting there going, well, they won a trophy and we didn't, so they had a better season than us and all the rest of it, that's fine if you want to have that opinion. But the sacking of Ange Postecoglou shows, A, that they didn't have a better season than us, and B, it shows you what Daniel Levy and Tottenham Hotspur, one of the biggest clubs in the country, as much as I don't like to say that, it shows you what they think about the Europa League, how highly they value that achievement. But anyway, we'll move on because this is an Arsenal podcast, but I thought that was big enough news for us to discuss it at the start of today's show. Let's talk Kepa Arrizabalaga next. Arsenal eyeing up the Chelsea goalkeeper. What do we think about this? We talked about this a little bit yesterday with DG on the channel. He joined me for a show yesterday on which we went through a load of Arsenal-related transfer stories. You can go back and check it out. It's the last episode on your podcast feeds. If you're an audio listener, it's the last video on the channel as well. So go back and check that out if you want. But we touched on the Kepa Arrizabalaga thing. And shortly after we published that show, we got an update from The Athletic. And I'll just bring that up just to make sure that I'm giving you the full story and making sure I'm not missing any kind of key details and information from that. Hold on a second. Let me just go onto the Arsenal page. I should have been prepared, but as I mentioned to you, nursing a bit of a sore head this morning. Anyway, so Arsenal make Chelsea's Kepa Arrizabalaga the main backup goalkeeper target. Now, the key word in that title and the key word in that headline is backup, because I think, we've looked at players that have come from Chelsea or from other Premier League clubs that you would maybe argue are in the kind of twilight of their careers. We've thought, well, maybe they can plug a hole for us. We brought Willian in when he was on a free transfer, and that obviously didn't work out. And we ended up, parting ways with him, and all of that happened. You think about Raheem Sterling, that's been an unmitigated disaster. There's no getting away from that. I understand why initially people, when they read stories like this, Jorginho was another player that we brought in cheap, but Jorginho, I think, did a really good job for us. Kai Havertz, we paid a lot of money for, but I think has been a good signing overall. There's been some hits when it comes to signing players from rivals, but there's been some misses as well. And I understand why people are a little bit cautious when it comes to these types of stories and these types of rumors. But The Athletic very clear in saying Arsenal have made Chelsea's Kepa Arrizabalaga their main target as they seek to recruit a backup goalkeeper. Neto is obviously returning to Bournemouth, and Espanyol's Joan Garcia, who we've been linked with for quite some time, looks poised to join Barcelona. According to this piece, there are other options still under consideration, but Kepa is the preferred target, the preferred candidate. He spent obviously last season on loan at Bournemouth, where he did quite well, but he has apparently a £5 million release clause in his Chelsea contract. Now, we've talked a lot about the goalkeeper situation and maybe what the right way to approach that is this summer. Is it a case of going out and bringing in another top-level goalkeeper, making that investment and genuinely trying to breed that competition? Or is it a case of prioritizing other areas and now thinking about how we can maybe plug that hole in the short term while we develop the likes of Setford and Porter, young goalkeepers that are already at our club? Obviously, Karl Heinz coming back from his loan as well. Don't know what that's going to look like. Is he going to stay at Arsenal? Is he going to move on? We'll have to wait and see. But I think for £5 million, this is a no-brainer. If you're talking 10, 15 million pounds, I probably look at it differently. But I was very, very big on saying that to go and sign Joan Garcia, yeah, great, good goalkeeper, probably does end up challenging David Raya down the line and at some point. But even when Mikel Arteta had both Aaron Ramsdale and David Raya at the club, competition in the goalkeeping position was not something really that he believed in. I don't think anyway. I mean, his words said one thing, but his actions said something completely different, because there were plenty of opportunities to give Aaron Ramsdale minutes, and Mikel Arteta decided against that, and he went fully with David Raya. Think about Neto last season. How many times did he play? I know he was cup-tied annoyingly, so we brought in a cup goalkeeper who was cup-tied. Silly bit of business. But if Arsenal were intending on leaving David Raya out of those cup games, then maybe they'd have gone and got someone that wasn't cup tied, which suggests that in Mikel Arteta's mind, David Raya is very clearly the number one and will play pretty much every time he's available. So, £5 million for an experienced top-level goalkeeper in Kepa Arrizabalaga, to me, makes perfect sense. And it does not tie our hands behind our backs in terms of going out and doing the more maybe priority business and the more important business in the eyes of us as supporters and as fans. And so it makes sense in that sense. But I've talked a lot about the word backup, right? We keep using that word backup. Now, Kepa is 30 years old. Will Kepa want to leave Chelsea to be the backup at Arsenal? Or will he want to look elsewhere? Will he want to move on somewhere a little bit further and go somewhere where he's going to get that starting role? Because he's a good enough goalkeeper to be a number one at most clubs. So now it's about trying to convince him. And maybe with a goalkeeper of this level, you would have to be a little bit less stubborn, I guess, in terms of the rotation of the goalkeepers. Maybe you would have to promise him the cup games, and maybe that's the only way that you get this deal done. But look, when we heard of the rumors around this, and we heard that he was available for £5 million, there was mixed reaction to this online, as you'd expect there to be because of his Chelsea past. But I think this is just an easy decision, really. If you can convince the player, if you can be honest and upfront with him about what his role is going to look like, and he's okay with that, then for me, you move ahead, you do this, and you bring him in, and then you start trying to wrap up those deals for players further up the pitch. Let me know what you guys think on this as well. I'm really, really interested to get your take on this. Is Kepa the guy to come in and support David Raya? Because that's all he'd be doing. He wouldn't be coming in to play as the number one. Let's have a look at what you guys are saying on this in the live chat. But just very, very quickly before we do that, don't forget to leave a like on the video if you haven't done so already. We are slacking in that department, but there's well over 500 of you with us live right now, so get involved with that if you can. Also subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. That really does help. And if you're listening on audio, leave us a review. That also helps too. Okay, so Into the Box says, I have a feeling that Kepa is Berta's idea because of how shit Raya is at pens. Look, Raya's the number one at Arsenal, and I'd imagine will probably be for a number of years now. Is it Berta's idea? It might be an option that Andrea Berta has presented to Mikel Arteta and to the rest of the club, having done a bit of digging and figured out what the player's release clause looks like. If it is, good on him, because this feels like the identification of a potentially very smart bit of business. And I hope we move forward with this. And the reason is, like, I said it with DG yesterday, right? We talked about this, and I said, we're at the stage now where we've got to be making the team better. We've got to be making the squad better with every move that we make. And in 10 out of 11 positions on the pitch, I'm not accepting players that we feel are market opportunities. I want players that we've gone out, looked at, researched, gone in depth on, and really truly believe are going to come in and help this team move forward. But the 1 out of 11 positions where I don't mind us being a little bit more reactive to the market rather than proactive is in the goalkeeping department, because we need a backup goalkeeper. And we've seen that unless something happens to David Raya, and touch wood it doesn't, that Mikel Arteta isn't going to constantly rotate in this area of the pitch. So to go and blow a really significant amount of resource on that position, to me, would just make no sense whatsoever. As I say, in 10 out of 11 positions on the pitch, I want us to be proactive. I want us to be on it, bang on it, searching for the right players, the right people to take us forward. But in that backup goalkeeping position, I'm more than happy for Arsenal to be reactive to the market opportunities rather than the other way around. What else have we got in the chat? Frederick says, if you get him for 5 million, get both Gyökeres and Sesko. I've never felt at any point that we were going to go out and get both Gyökeres and Sesko. So signing, if we do sign Kepa for £5 million, isn't really going to change that, I don't think. A big hello to Aguna Matata in the chat as well, and everybody else. What else have we got? Tom says, Kepa for 5 million is a complete no-brainer. Let's secure this and move on to the key signings. Aguna Matata says, how can you be live on 2 different channels at the same time? I'm not, am I? You was live on 2 different channels yesterday. How does that work? Chat, if you could help me out. What? Maybe someone recorded something with me and premiered it. I don't know. Thierry Henry, not the real Thierry Henry. Who cares about penalties? Just responded to that point about David Raya not being great from penalties. Look, people say that, and he did show himself to dive early a few times in a situation that, yeah, was a little bit strange. I agree with that. You know, there was a few penalties where he went really early and almost gift wrapped to the striker the kind of, you know, the vision of where he was going to go, meaning it was easy for the striker to just put it in the other end of the net and score the goal pretty easily. But yeah, listen, yeah, most penalties should be scored. Most penalties should be, finished off. That's the probability, isn't it? We're talking about when it comes to penalties. But it's important to have a goalkeeper that breeds a little bit of fear into the taker, whether that be in a match situation or in a shootout situation. It's one of the skill sets that, a goalkeeper, can develop and improve in. But I don't think it would be the be all and end all, if I'm being completely honest with you. Neil Patterson says this absolutely makes good business sense. Rosso Gunner says Kepa would be a good signing. However, I've concern with the wage that he might be asking given his current wage at Chelsea. Yeah, that's a point, and that's something obviously that Arsenal would need to explore and figure out. Right, that's enough about Kepa Arrizabalaga. You got my take on it. I think it would be a smart bit of business, but my reservation and concern about it is this something that he wants? In which case, will there be a deal? Obviously, the 5 million release clause means that we don't have to negotiate with Chelsea as long as we cough up that money, but we do have to negotiate with the player, and we do have to convince him that the backup role is the right one for him at Arsenal. Anyway, let's move on. Short pause. When we come back, we're going to talk Benjamin Sesko. What's the latest on the RB Leipzig star?
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe.
You heard him. Like and subscribe to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, your host, Harry Symeou. Don't forget to leave us a like on the video if you haven't done so already. There's over 600 of you with us. We haven't even got 100 likes on the board yet. There's no reason why we shouldn't have at least 300. If just half of you press the like button, we would get there. It doesn't cost a thing. It really, really helps the channel. Also, subscribing if you're listening on audio, leave us a review. So, what is the latest then on Benjamin Sesko? Because for a while we've been sort of in this, Sesko world where we've been discussing, his merits, whether he would be the right player for Arsenal. We've kind of gone back and forward between him and Victor Gyökeres quite a bit. It was reported yesterday that Arsenal are now advancing in their negotiations for Benjamin Sesko after initial concrete talks were reported last week. This was reported by a number of different sources, Fabrizio Romano being one of them. John Cross has put something out where he says Arsenal are pushing on Sesko. So pretty much everybody is saying that Arsenal are moving ahead with this. Sky Sports, who I know are normally a little bit behind the curve. And the reason Sky Sports are behind the curve, I'll explain this for people because I think they often get a bit of a bad rep for this. But I've worked with quite a few people over the last few years that work at Sky Sports, reporters at Sky Sports, producers at Sky Sports, people that obviously make the magic happen. And there's a lot of outlets, like there's a lot of individual journalists too, right, that aren't answerable to anybody. So what they'll do is they'll get a story and they'll just publish it. And they'll go out there, they'll put the story out and they'll just watch it catch fire, basically. Now, with Sky, because they have such a strong relationship with the Premier League, obviously they're the main broadcaster here in the UK, and they've got even more games next season. This is not a Sky Sports advert, by the way, but they've improved on that deal basically that already exists, and they're going to show an unprecedented amount of Premier League games next season, which is incredible. What that means is that they want to maintain good relationships with the football clubs that they're tasked with working on a weekly basis. And so Sky, I know, when they get a hold of a story, do so much more research into it than some of the other outlets that will just pick it up and run with it. They want to be as sure as they possibly can. And I know of examples where people at Sky have had a story, couldn't quite get it verified in time, and then somebody else has gone out and reported it before them because they're not worried about any relationships and they're not worried about how that comes across, only for Sky to look like they're massively behind the curve. But it's because they do just that little bit more digging. Now, I'm not saying that journalists that report stories as individuals or off their own backs are not doing that research and don't have those contacts. I'm not saying that for a second, but Sky always want to double, sometimes triple check, just because of the relationships they have with the Premier League and the clubs that they are then broadcasting pretty much every week. So that's why it sounds like sometimes they're a little bit behind. But Sky Germany did say yesterday that there is a formal approach has taken place. Arsenal formally approached RB Leipzig over the signing of Benjamin Sesko. So look, I know people are frustrated. I know people are looking at their calendars and going, why haven't we done this? And why haven't we done that? And why are other clubs getting business done and we're not? Blah, 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 blah. I get it, right? I get the frustration, but I keep saying it. It's June the 7th, man. Nothing significant, I don't think, or not. That's wrong. Let me rephrase that. Most significant deals are going to go through post the Club World Cup. For a lot of clubs, they'd prefer to do deals in July because of the way it all works with the accounting periods and all the rest of it. So you're going to see, I think, the majority of the movement post the 1st of July. That doesn't mean you can't get things in place. That doesn't mean that you can't negotiate. That doesn't mean that you can't get your ducks in a row so that when that time comes, you're ready to execute as swiftly and as quickly as possible. But, the fact that we're not hearing officially of any deals involving Arsenal just yet, it's not anything at this point to be massively concerned about. There's been a lot of talk about Sesko for a long, long time, and that's why it feels like we're dragging our heels with this. But the reality is that the season's only been finished for 2 weeks now, and so we're moving into summer mode. We're moving into transfer mode, and Arsenal, as far as we understand it, are now in talks with RB Leipzig directly to try and get this thing wrapped up. Now, I would guess that if Arsenal are at the point where they're now talking with RB Leipzig, that they've done their bit with Benjamin Sesko. I know that's not necessarily how it used to work, or maybe even how it should work, but we know that in the modern day, with agents, intermediaries, and so many other people involved in transfers, it's often the case that the club goes and feels out whether the player would be interested in joining, tries to gauge that maybe via those agents or intermediaries. And often there is an understanding of what a potential contract would look like before they then proceed and go and open those negotiations with the club itself. So, yeah, I think Arsenal are probably quite far down the line with Benjamin Sesko. Now it's a case of agreeing that transfer fee with RB Leipzig. I know there is a release clause. I'm sure Arsenal will be working to sign him for less than that. I'm sure Arsenal will be working on a structure regarding the payments that works better for them. I think there's a lot that needs to be ironed out here, but obviously the news that we heard yesterday is positive. We're going to do a bit of a video scouting piece on Benjamin Sesko. I'm going to record it a little bit later on today. If I edit it in time, I'll get it out today. If not, then it will be with you guys tomorrow morning. But yeah, come over to Patreon if you're interested. Patreon.com/The Chronicles of a Goon. And the reason we're doing it on Patreon is because if I upload it in a certain type of way, I'm not going to be bound by the copyright laws, which means I can show you guys the actual video that we're talking over. So I think that'll be quite interesting. Check it out. But yeah, we're going to do that because I've got some thoughts on the player, and I think if I show you video, I can probably explain and describe what I want to a little bit better. Let's take some of your thoughts and questions on this. Ross Taylor says, Harry, do you believe Sesko comes in as a starter? Personally, I don't. Havertz will still be starting number 9 next season, and that's what's bothering me about this transfer. Yeah, I think there's a good chance that that Kai Havertz starts the season at centre forward, but I would have probably said that's the case even if Victor Gyökeres comes in. Now, I know not everybody thinks that that's right, and I know not everybody wants to see that. I've been talking about it on recent shows. I think there'll be a lot of people that will be deeply concerned, or maybe deeply concerned is the wrong one, deeply frustrated if Arsenal start a campaign having spent 70 odd million on a striker with Kai Havertz up top. But Kai Havertz isn't going anywhere, guys. He is very, very well liked at Arsenal, very, very appreciated at Arsenal. And I think most people can see now that he is a very, very useful asset to us and someone that we can extract quite a bit out of in a variety of different ways. Sesko's a 22-year-old kid. Like, at the end of the day, you bring him in from another league, from a different club where he's been working with different methods, different philosophies. He's going to need some time to bed in. So don't look at the Kai Havertz thing as a problem. Look at it as a positive. What the Kai Havertz option at centre forward means is that there isn't that immense pressure on this young lad to come in and hit the ground running straight away. Like, there will be some pressure because of the fee, and there will be some pressure because people have been talking about Arsenal getting a centre forward in for how many years now, right? But To be able to share that goal scoring burden at the beginning, I think with Kai Havertz could work really, really well for Benjamin Sesko. And I think we should look at it as a positive, the fact that he can kind of, hold the fort down until Sesko's ready, and that they can, if it's not one's day, the other one can come on, and then they can share that role. I think is really, really important. I really, really do. So I look at it as a positive rather than a negative. Joe Coker says, with Havertz up front, we will never win a Premier League. It's not just about who plays up front, is it? The points tally that we achieved, not the season that's just finished, not last season, the season before that, where we took it to the final day with Manchester City, that would win you the league in a lot of instances. And Kai Havertz was a big part of that team. So, there's other factors. This idea that Kai Havertz is the problem and the one holding us back is a complete nonsense. The best version of Arsenal we've probably seen in the last 2 decades is the version of Arsenal that, as I said, pushed Manchester City to the final day the season before last now. And Kai Havertz played a huge role and a huge part in that. The disrespect that the guy gets, to me, is just, honestly, it's crazy. Carrie says, will the club make this official at the same time as the Zubimendi deal? Romano said Zubimendi is on his way to the Emirates. Did he say that? Where has he said that? I mean, I've been a bit kind of away with the fairies this morning, so I will scroll through quickly. I can't see anything to that effect. But I mean, look, again, it's about accounting periods. It's about, getting everything in place for those official announcements. But that's not really what the problem should be here. Like, as long as those players are signed and in by the time we start pre-season, that's all that matters. That's all that matters. Get them in for pre-season. Get them in with their teammates. I mean, if you sign Zubimendi today or in 3 weeks' time, what's the difference? All his teammates are on their bloody holidays. They're not going to be there, training, cracking on. Like, people say, you need as much time as possible to get to know your new teammates and all the rest of it. And I agree with that. But that ain't going to happen now because everyone's on holiday. Zubimendi hasn't even been on holiday yet, by the way, because he's been playing with the Spanish national team. So, I think we've got to be a little bit careful about making a mountain out of a molehill with this whole thing around the timings. And I know, Carrie, you're not doing that. I know you're asking about when I think that they'll be made official. We know that Real Sociedad want this deal to go through in July for the accounting reasons that we touched on earlier. So I don't think you should expect anything before July in terms of official confirmation. You might get a report saying that he's done his medical, that he's ready to go, and that we're just waiting an official announcement, in which case, fine. But the transaction, I don't think will happen until July now as well. And, maybe it suits Arsenal to do the same thing with Benjamin Sesko. Maybe it suits RB Leipzig. We don't know. We don't know the ins and outs of it. And that's why I always advise people not to get too bogged down by the details. Flashlight Junkie says, Harry, is the Kepa decision bad for Raya? It's going to destabilize him and introduce doubt and uncertainty affecting his performances. It depends on how it's communicated, doesn't it? Like, I don't for a second think that it brings any doubt upon David Raya's position, Kepa Arrizabalaga potentially coming in. I look at it in a different way. More experienced goalkeeper at the very, very highest level, Spanish. The coaching staff, the goalkeeping coach is Spanish. The manager is Spanish. There's obviously going to be some common ground there. I think they learn from each other. And if the communication is there from the beginning with regards to whose role looks like what, I don't think it destabilizes. I think Raya felt a little bit under pressure, and maybe it hindered his performances a bit when Aaron Ramsdale was at the club because of the fan pressure. If Kepa comes in, there isn't going to be that fan pressure, is there? There isn't going to be Arsenal fans up in arms about, one of the goalkeepers not playing, which was the case with Ramsdale. Again, not because he was a flawless goalkeeper. He absolutely wasn't, but because he had a really big reputation with the fan base, and there was that connection there. But over time, we were all proved wrong. Because over time, David Raya proved that he was actually, by quite some distance, the better goalkeeper. Mikel Arteta was proved right, as he's been proved right with a lot of other signings as well. We were talking about Mikel Merino just the other day. for the first 6 months of his Arsenal career, I was thinking, what have we done there? Genuinely, I was thinking that. And now I look at him and I look at him ripping it up for Spain and I look at him playing in multiple positions for us. And I think that was a really good addition to the squad. Sometimes we just have to take a step back and realize that we don't always know best. And, it's not to shit on people's opinions, but we don't have all the information all of the time. We just don't. Junior Gunner says, Harry, our two biggest competitors have goal machines, such as Haaland, who in a bad season gets you 25. Salah is the same. Havertz gets stick because he misses chances in key moments, i.e. against Newcastle United. Yeah, but nobody's denying that we'd like that killer in front of goal, or we could do with that killer in front of goal. Nobody's denied that for a second. It's just the point of if you've watched Arsenal for the last few seasons and you've been frustrated with that position in particular, why don't you look at the football club? Why don't you look at the club and go, why haven't you gone out and bought that player? Why haven't you gone out and spent the money to bring in this top level striker that we all crave and that a lot of us believe would make a big difference? Why do people vent on Havertz? Why is the finger pointed at Kai Havertz? Kai Havertz isn't to blame for Arsenal's wider transfer policy. Kai Havertz is a good footballer who's been tasked with playing a certain role and does it to the best of his ability. And, nobody can fault his effort. Nobody can fault his application, his commitment levels. So if you're frustrated by the fact that you don't believe we have, as you put it, a goal machine, look at the football club, not Kai Havertz. And that's why I feel the need to defend him. That's why a lot of people feel the need to defend him, because the anger and frustration is misplaced. It's like in January when we all wanted a striker and Mikel Arteta was sitting there saying we're short, we need to add something. Then we don't get one. And everybody coming out the back of the January window going, that Arteta is bloody useless, didn't get us a striker. He told you he wanted one. It wasn't him that prevented us from moving in the market to sign one. In fact, we know that he wanted to sign one. He said it himself. And after the January window, when a stupid question was put to him in a press conference that said, do you now think that maybe you should have got a striker? He said, did I not make it clear that I wanted one? It was obvious. It was very clear. It was as clear as day. So, yeah, I get what you're saying. I do. But, Salah was at Liverpool the season before last and they were nowhere near us. We had a strike. We didn't have a striker that got anywhere near Haaland's goals. But the Premier League title the season before last, I have to get used to saying that, was decided on the final day. So if it made that much of a difference, and I'm not saying it doesn't make any difference, but if it was the difference, then the Premier League title race wouldn't have gone to the final day because he was miles ahead of anything that we had in terms of individual outputs. Ali says Kepa's wages at Chelsea, 150k a week, is more than Raya's at the moment, despite the low fee of 5 mil. Do you think these wages are too high for a second choice goalkeeper? Arguably, yes. But you've got to find that balance, don't you, as a football club, between wages and fees. If you're going to go and sign a goalkeeper for 10 million on lesser wages, but you're paying 10 million to sign him, then that could come to the same cost. So again, it's about, for me, just weighing up the bigger picture and understanding the bigger picture. And again, this is where I sort of take a little bit of a step back because I don't understand, all the ins and outs of the financials at Arsenal Football Club. And I think we should leave that to the club to do it. In terms of whether it's too much, I think you can certainly make that case for sure. But what jumped out at me when I started reading your question was more a case of, well, is that going to piss off David Raya? When we talk about unsettling David Raya, I don't think you're going to unsettle him in terms of his position. But if he's got Kepa coming in on 150k a week, warming the bench for him and warming him up before games, he's probably going to look at him and go, well, why aren't I on 150k a week or more? So that's where the problem potentially arises for me. But it's a really good point. Look, guys, I am going to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining me. I do want to spend a bit of time getting this Sesko video ready as well for our patrons. Thank you so much for the amazing support. As always, don't forget to leave a like on the video. There's over 700 of you with us now. Come on, let's get 400 likes by the time I hit end stream. That should be easy. Doesn't cost a thing. Get involved. And yeah, let's continue through the summer. We'll keep you up to date with everything that's going on. We'll share opinions. We'll get your views and takes from the chat box as well, which I always very, very much enjoy. Yeah, subscribe, leave us a review, like the video, all the rest of it. And I will see you on the next episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Until then, take care of yourselves and have a wonderful Saturday. Goodbye.